just love that plant. She's so generous. I think her medicine touches on so many different levels.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. Before diving into today's interview, I'm thrilled to introduce a new feature on the podcast, the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week, we'll take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our learning community. This week's spotlight shines on an exceptional herbal student, Shelley Freeland from California. Shelley has taken every course offered at Herbs with Rosalee, and despite working full-time, Shelley enthusiastically attends live events and actively participates. In her first year with Rooted Medicine Circle in 2023, she completed a capstone project blending her Ayurvedic training with course principles. Shelley even taught a free 7-week Ayurvedic lifestyle masterclass over Zoom, covering topics like nutrition, herbs, and nature connection. This year, she joined us again for Rooted Medicine Circle, Building Resilience, and also the Herbal Energetics course. It's always a joy to have her in class. Her dedication and involvement in every course are truly inspiring. To honor Shelley's contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs will be sending her a $50 gift certificate to stock up on sustainably grown and harvested herbal supplies. Mountain Rose Herbs is my go-to for high-quality organic spices, herbal remedies, and even hard-to-find botanicals. They ship all over the United States, and they have a massive selection of products to fuel your herbal adventures. Thank you to Mountain Rose Herbs for supporting our amazing students, and congrats once again to Shelley Freeland. I had the pleasure of meeting Helen earlier this year in Italy, and I don't get to say that about many people. To be fair, we had exchanged emails over the years, so we knew of each other, but meeting her in person was truly an unexpected gift. We just really clicked. Through this conversation, we get to hear about Helen's relationship with elderberry, and towards the end, we meander to the important themes of herbalism like connection and finding our place in the world around us, and many other things as well. For those of you who don't already know her, Helen has been joyfully working with plants for over 20 years and has spent 14 years combining her professional career with her passion by serving as the director of Rosemary Gladstar's The Science and Art of Herbalism course. Helen is dedicated to deepening students' relationships with plants through Rosemary's teachings. She teaches at local, national, and international herb events, has been featured in online publications, and provides local herbal care. Helen has contributed to both the International Herb Symposium and Women's Herbal Conference, and her Vermont farm is part of the United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary Network. And last but not least, she loves hiking with her puppy and spending time in her garden. Helen, I've been looking forward to having you on the show for months, so I'm so excited this is finally happening. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here, Rosalee, with you.
Oh, yeah, well, I feel like the honor is mine.
Since I saw you in Italy.
I know, that's pretty fun. Yeah, I'm wearing the beautiful shawl that you gave me in Italy, and yeah, I was just reflecting on that trip today and just thinking like, wow, like what a year it's been. And that kind of my year kind of like in some way started with that trip. And you were like the special hidden, the surprise gift from that trip because meeting you was so much fun. And I just feel like we really connected and yeah, so it's just like great to like pick up that thread again with you. So
I feel the same.
Oh,
yeah. Sitting in class with you that afternoon outside and just your way of teaching, Rosalee, really struck me.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun surprise
And
class
personally,
to teach. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it wasn't
Well,
enough.
yeah. So one thing that's been really fun for me with the podcast is it's my opportunity to get to know people even better. And so one of my favorite parts is this first question where we get to hear your herbal story and what brought you to the plant path.
Hmm. So I think for me, it's been a lifelong journey.
Mm.
Um, when I was young, I grew up in Florida, and I was always the one that was covered in dirt. I had this little um, music player. It was like an old record player. And we had
Hmm.
an outlet out in the front yard, and we didn't have grass. We had ivy so that we didn't have to actually grow mow the lawn. And I was just always the one that was constantly outside playing in the dirt, playing in the sand at the beach. I love nature. Um, and so I think it's a knowing. I think a lot of us understand and appreciate that.
Mhm.
And then as kind of my life and my journey, my father introduced me to the Rocky Mountains when I was about 6 or 7, and I fell in love with mountain life. And I think that's a big part of how I ended up in Vermont in the Green Mountains. But as I continued to kind of navigate my life, I lived in Colorado for a period of time before I moved to Boston and started my professional career and had my first child. And I have 2 boys, and when they were both born, we lived just outside of Boston. And my youngest has severe allergies and asthma, and we ended up in Children's Hospital in the allergy and asthma department in downtown Boston. And I will never forget the moment and the feeling. And again, going back to that knowing, where we walked in for the appointment, and the allergist, basically, when we left, I think I had 15 different prescriptions. It
Oh.
blew me away. One was this steroid cream that he could use, that we as his parents, because he was young, don't use this on his face or any other sensitive places, but you can use this everywhere. And he needs to take this inhaler this time. And I mean, I walked out of there thinking there has to be a different way.
Mm.
And he was allergic to anaphylactic to milk and eggs. And we came home that night,
Oh.
and we had an older son, and I took a carton of eggs out of the refrigerator. And have you ever dropped a carton of eggs on the floor? I mean,
I have
it
not.
was just stressful. And I
Oh.
just remember thinking, this is insane. Like, there
Mm.
has to be a different way. And this is the Children's Hospital in Boston, and this is their way. And I sound so judgmental, and I am in that, honestly. But and that was it. We took all of the dairy and eggs out of our home that night, cleaned up the dozen eggs that I had dropped on the floor because
Mm.
I was I was so nervous about it. And I just dove in. And like
Mm.
many young mothers, I became self taught. And I
Mm.
knew in my being that there was a different way. I just hadn't, I think I'd been there in other lifetimes, but not this one. I lost my mom when I was young. And I just, I didn't have that person in my life yet who was basically how many teachers I have now that I'm so grateful for, kind of on our herbal path. But I think that was the biggest moment for me that really set me to understanding and knowing there was a different way.
Mm.
And then fast forward, and I moved to Vermont about 16 years ago. And I was playing with my boys at the river one day, and I look out, and there's this young kid. I say young, he was just out of college, bright red hair, just vibrant and fun, and out there with all the kids playing on this log. And I ended up meeting his parents. They happened to be visiting Vermont for a long weekend, and he had just moved here, and the parents were visiting. And he came over, and he had graduated from a school that really incorporated kind of uh, permaculture, herbal medicine, and we had just been blessed to purchase a farm here in Vermont. It was a time when, the real estate market had dropped, and we got really lucky.
Mm,
It's conserved land, which was completely in alignment because I feel like we are all just stewards of the land.
mhm.
And this gentleman came over one afternoon and was playing with my kids and said, "Have you ever heard of Sage Mountain and Rosemary Gladstar?" And I hadn't.
Hmm.
And I ended up driving to Sage Mountain. I had my first official class, and the second she started teaching, and I met all of the people that were there, I knew that I was home. Really
Mhm.
was what it was. And then I just dove in from there, and all different, as many classes as I could take. Anything she offered that summer, I took. I was
Mhm.
hooked, 100% hooked.
Oh, that's so fun to hear. I know that there was a time in my life when I didn't know Rosemary Gladstar. I know that that time exists, but it's hard to imagine it now. But to show up, like, for one of her classes and not know, like, you're just kinda like, "Oh, this, fiery redhead said go to this class." Like, that's just fun to think about, like, "Oh." And I love that, like, I had a very kind of similar, like, this one day changed my life forever, and I assume that both of us would have found our way on the plant path if that one day hadn't happened, it would have been another day, but it is kind of fun to, like, go back to that, like, moment, that moment of, like, "Have you heard of Sage Mountain?" "Do you know of rosemary?" And,
And I remember getting the binder. I
mm,
signed up for the course, and I
mhm,
I still have my binder. It's the one I reference for work, and
mhm,
now in my daily work. But I just remember saying I didn't know who she was, and I showed up, and I just loved everything about her, about the mountain, about every single person that showed up. Had such heart, and
mhm,
it felt so authentic to me, and
mm,
again, so home. I mean, we talk about that, our people, right? Our
mhm, mhm.
community. It's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I think rosemary, that's one of her many types of magic is she draws people together in really beautiful ways. I felt like that in Italy, the people we were with in Italy, we were just together for, 5 short days, but you go there and it feels like family. You meet all these just wonderful, wonderful people, and yeah,
Agreed.
that's part of her one of her many ways of magic. And so, flash forward, you started taking classes with Rosemary. How soon after taking classes with her did you know, like, "Well, I'm here for it. She's never
For the
gonna get rid of
plants?
me." For Rose and working with Rosemary and working with the
Oh,
school.
well, that was a dream.
Yeah.
um, that's a funny story. I was in transition. We were starting this farm, and as we know, oftentimes when we start working with the plants, we need other. In Vermont, we say we have 2 or 3 jobs, all of us.
Mhm,
It's not typically one job that we work, and I think as herbalists, that's true. And when
mhm.
we start out, especially.
Yep.
And so I was looking for part-time work, and I had a friend who his family had run the local insurance company for years,
Mhm,
for actually, like, like not centuries, but probably 40 years.
mm,
And I went for an interview because I thought it would be perfect, kind of mother's hours, if you will. It was a part-time job. It offered healthcare and insurance and the things that I was looking for. And I went for the interview, and he looked at me and said, "Really? Like, I think you might be bored here."
mm,
And I remember going home, and my husband at the time said to me, "You should really, I love writing cards." And and if I can back up, if I can,
sure.
at Sage Mountain and at conferences and a lot of places, when Rosemary's there, she is surrounded by beautiful people, students, those that she's traveled with before that have questions from a class she's taught or just want to say hello to her.
Mhm,
And when we were at Sage, I noticed there were a few times, 3 in particular, that I remember, where I was in her apothecary, just having this aha moment of how many people had been touched by the plants and her magic. Really, like, I was just standing there in awe, looking at her apothecary at Sage Mountain, and she would walk in, and it would just be the 2 of us. And I thought, that's so interesting. And then I think the second time it happened, I thought to myself, never in a million years, but go for it. And I and I offered. I said, if you ever need any help, I'm looking for work and I would love to help you. And I adore her. She did her oh, thank you, honey. And I thought, yep, not gonna happen. She was so kind, right? I'm not, this is more my own insecurity than how she responded. But I just thought, and so anyway, fast forward, I had gone for this insurance job interview, and I love writing cards. So I wrote her a letter, and I just thanked her for the classes and for hosting us all at the mountain. And again, if there was anything that I could do to assist her, that I would really love to help her in any way that I could. And the next week, Rosalee, I almost either peed in my pants or fell over. I got a card, and she said, come have tea with me. And so I started part-time working with her son, Jason. And we put her course online. And that was, I think, 14 years ago.
Wow. Wow.
And it's a blessing every day that I wake up, truly. Such an honor and a privilege.
And I can imagine, an honor and a privilege for Rosemary to have someone like you directing everything. I remember in Italy, we did like a little guided session with Dandelion with you, and I was just really struck by your groundedness and just your obvious love and connection to the plants as well. And
Thank you.
I know that you just recently did a keynote, and it was your first keynote. I also did essentially my first keynote this year. And I don't know, how was that? Tell me about it. Where was it? What'd you talk about?
So it was thank you. It was such an honor to be invited. It really was a beautiful, so it was in the Catskills, New York. It's the Northeast Herb Association. They have been, I think it's 33 years that they've been gathering. Rosemary started it, which ironically, until I got down there, I didn't know.
It was like another thing that
somehow I missed that. And she wasn't able to go, but it was such a lovely event, and a group of really, I think so I was, full disclosure, I was petrified.
I hear you. I hear you.
I think from a perspective, and maybe you can appreciate this, they were a group of very established herbalists, and I felt really, what do I have to offer? What could I share that would give insight? And anyway, I sat in meditation and prayed to Spirit and asked. And so the theme of the weekend was planting seeds. So Andrea and Matthias were there, and they did a class on mushrooms, and there were some other really beautiful classes. And I chose to weave in this time for me. I think many of us are struggling in some way, shape, or form. I think that we are living through challenging times, and it is really, in my belief system, I think that we all need to shine bright right now. Those of us that are plant lovers and that are walk with this earth in right relationship. So I spoke to nurturing your inner landscape, and just reminders and mantras that we can do, meditations that we can do. And my hope and prayer was that maybe there was one little nugget that would help someone in the room as a reminder of how to really have good self-care. Because as we also know, as healers, we often cannot take great care of ourselves and have good boundaries for ourselves. And I think it's really important in this moment, again, for us to nurture ourselves and to really look inward. And then I also wove in, because I think it's part of it, and I think a little bit, and I shared with Mason on the podcast I did with him, but I've recently taken a journey into healing my own trauma. And so I wove that in a little bit of how it is really hard work to do, but I think the brilliance that comes is that by really looking inward and being able to unpack those boxes and really look at the trauma that we've held in our lifetimes. While I am learning very clearly that the work is never done, because sometimes I think it is, and then I get the whack. There I am again. But so that's what I spoke to. And I think that my prayer is that it touched people and that they were able to take something home that would nurture themselves, or maybe help them unpack a box that they hadn't unpacked yet, of their own traumas, and looking at it. And then from there, I think it really deepens our connections with each other, with our communities, and with the plants. It opens us up.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Helen. And yeah, it's such a needed message. I feel like sometimes our inner landscape can be overlooked almost because it's like um, so much a part of ourselves that we don't second guess it. And it can just be like habitual, the way we talk to ourselves, or the moods that we're in, or the stories we tell. It's like it's like a constant, running on constant play. And if we don't take a moment to be like, is that what I want to be constantly listening to? Is that the inner monologue I want? Is that the inner landscape I want? And just how much it takes really intentionality to really think about our inner landscape and to create it with intentions. That's really beautiful. I feel like I didn't even hear it, and I'm just, having something to take away. And then for you to share your own journey with that too. And there's something, I've been reading a lot of Brene Brown lately, and there's something to be said about when we share the ways we've healed. It's a type of vulnerability that really does allow for connection and for inspiration. And so I got that sense as well. So yeah, that's really beautiful. And yeah, those keynotes, they're tricky, they're nerve-wracking. I think the best, the ones I really like are the ones that aren't like just herbal facts or, A plus B equals C kind of stuff, but as these like bigger themes of of knowing.
And may I ask, because I'm so curious, what was your theme? What was your keynote on, and where were you?
Do I talk on when I'm interviewing?
I know, I want to hear though. Okay, well, if you don't want to, it's okay.
Well, I was in Michigan and I did.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I actually, this is maybe topical. So in Italy, I did a surprise class. Nobody saw it coming, especially me. It just ended up happening. And it's about inflammation, because that's the topic that I get really fired up about it. And someone could say, go, and I could talk about it. So I did that in Italy as just like a super spontaneous class. And it was really fun. And so I did a version of that for Michigan, but I was tying it into kind of bigger themes and like bigger lessons from the plant. So not just like herbs are anti-inflammatory, but how they can teach us to be in a way that helps to modulate inflammation, just like in our own sense of being. So, yeah, it was fun. It was fun to be done with it. Like you said, it's a little bit nerve-wracking. So yeah.
I was really excited to go, and I was really excited to come home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything else that we might have missed on your path that you want to share, or I'll just stop there. Is there anything we've missed?
I mean, I don't. Not necessarily, no. As far as me coming to the plants.
Yeah.
And how I became
maybe a good
herbalist.
transition is why elderberry, because I know that is part of your path and your story. So you chose elderberry for today, and I'd love to hear, about how elderberry has shown up in your life. I know it's not in small ways.
Yeah, Elder is such an ally of mine, and I'm so grateful for her. I think it first started so there's a few reasons that I chose the plant. One is because she is an ally of mine, and I absolutely adore community herbalism. And the other thing is I'm a huge proponent as food is medicine, which I think is one of the things that I love about you, Rosalee, is how you incorporate the plants into our daily habits and diet. And that is how, at least from my perspective, one of the things that you teach that is, I just feel so in alignment with that. And I love Elder because she is food is medicine. And, there's really no contraindications. I mean, we need to cook the seeds, cook the berries. The seeds have a little cyanide in them, and making sure that we are harvesting the right one, not the red berries, the racemosa, but the Sambucus nigra. I just love that plant. She's so generous. I think her medicine touches on so many different levels. And for me, how I really started working with her was when we purchased this farm in Vermont and wanted to start, supporting our community. When I moved here to Vermont, the local food movement was very much in the height of its, kind of just coming in, I think. And people were walking to work. They were we were trying to eat food that wasn't more than 100 miles outside of our radius. And I really felt like our community didn't have, so we have local herbalists, but there weren't, as far as herbal medicine, there weren't a lot of offerings when I first moved here. There are now, which is lovely. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of communities now where there's, which is what our goal is. I think our mission of all of us is to have an herbalist in every community and an herbalist maybe even on every block and in every home, which is, where we used to be when our grandmothers and aunts and sisters and, would be working with the plants. So elderberry for me was always, or elder, was a plant that was easy to grow. It was native to Vermont, but we did plant a whole bunch of different varieties when I moved to the farm. And it was something that I could offer my community that I knew, again, was food as medicine, but boosted our immune system and really had such powerful antiviral properties. I loved that about it. And so when we planted for a couple seasons, and then I started making elderberry syrup in my community, and it is just a love of mine. I love that plant. It's really fascinating to me how the plants show up for us, as much as when there's a respect and a reciprocity, I think is the word I was looking for. And she has absolutely shown up for me. I love how she grows. I feel like she grows in community, the way that she comes up, which is another love of mine. I love sharing her with the birds, the berries. I always on the farm had an agreement, I think, where, they would have a portion of them, but please leave some for me or vice versa.
And when with the farm, how many trees or shrubs did you have going of elder?
So we planted 800 to start.
800?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
We had a lot of elderberry, and so then what we found was we put a pond in for irrigation. The soil was, as we know, and I learned very quickly, elderberry, there's a couple things that I learned. One is she doesn't really like to be contained. Maybe that's why I like her so much. One of the reasons, but so we were trying to grow the bushes in rows and mowing. My previous husband was mowing them, so that they would stay kind of neat. And then the other thing we found was the soil was very sandy soil. So it didn't really hold water. So elder didn't really like where she was planted on the farm. There were places that she loved because she could be, on the sides of the banks where her feet could run down and get into the water is really where elder thrives. We see it here in Vermont and in a lot of places on the fringe of fields where you'll see along where the ditches are. That's where she really loves to grow because she can get her feet wet, but she can still be in the sunshine. And we got all the way to the plants were thriving, but then she sends up new shoots, right? And so there's a cycle where over 5, 6, 7 years where the stalks will start to die out as the new shoots come up. and it's a
Mhm.
constant, which is what I, back to that community where it just keeps, but they spread as runners and then they come up, as you know. And so mowing them, we were just constantly mowing down. And this wasn't something that I knew in the very beginning, and then in an effort to keep them kind of in line, if you will, but as we know, nature doesn't really prefer that.
Yep. Mm.
So we were going to put in irrigation, and then unfortunately, that's when we hit a divorce moment.
Mm.
And at the same time, I had been working for Rosemary and was transitioning from part-time to more full-time.
Mm.
And so it was at that moment that I let the bushes that were in the center of the field that just didn't have all that they needed. I moved some of them, and others just naturally died off, unfortunately. And so there
Mhm.
was a big transition of that, which was, yeah, there's a lot. There were some emotions there, as you can imagine.
Yeah. But I also just hear is a lot of like learning, like, and that's, I, I used to make herbal products and sell them at the market, and I don't anymore. I can't say it was a super successful endeavor, but I can tell you I learned a lot, and I'm grateful for every step of that way. And so that's kind of what I'm hearing, and you have such an affinity with elder, and I can only imagine how many gallons of elderberry syrup you've made, and
Oh,
and like
it's
all of
funny.
that is part of the process.
It is part of the process, and that reminded me of this really fun. My girlfriends here, when I first started going to Sage Mountain and studying, um, I'm sure you can appreciate this. Everywhere I went, anybody who said anything had any little ailment or larger thing, health issue, I constantly wanted to help, right? And
Mhm.
so their joke was they were going to make a bumper sticker that said, "I have a salve for that." 'Cause everywhere I went, I was like, have you heard of this? Do you know of yarrow? Have you heard of
Mhm.
plantain?
Mhm.
But when we were in that time frame, when we had planted all those trees and I was working really intensely with my community, I had a table at the farmer's market. And like you, I had a pretty, the community business was growing. And I showed up every week. And I think in the beginning, I was so enthusiastic. I had probably 100 different products I brought. I'm
Wow.
exaggerating, but the table was full. I
Mhm.
had salves and lip balms and spritzers and face creams and serums, and then lines of tinctures. And I formulated a tea blend that was just from the plants that grew on the farm. And I called it
Oh.
the welcome tea. And I'd make
Mm.
a big pot of it. I'd sell it dried, but then I'd make it and, give it away. I was offering it to people. And what I found over time was that really I dialed it down to 5 tinctures for
Mm.
my community,
Mm.
and I based it off of what our needs were. So I made the elderberry syrup, which was the immune kind of antiviral offering.
Mhm.
I had a bitters blend for digestion.
Mhm.
I had Tulsi for grounding and anxiety, and I made that one. That was the one tincture that I did, which was non-alcoholic. I did it in a glycerate,
Lovely.
which was really lovely.
Mhm.
And then I did an elderberry tincture and an elder plus immune tincture, and
Mm.
nettles, because a lot of people here had allergies and needed the support.
Mm.
And so I just dialed it down, and it really simplified and I think helped not only myself, but the community.
Oh, that's lovely. And so let's say someone walks over to your booth at the market back in the day and they say, "What's elder?" What
Mm.
what would you say?
I would say that
I think
elder,
'cause I'm sure you introduced elder to a lot of people, so I'm kind of curious. What was the introduction like?
first of all, I think it depends on who it is.
Mm.
um, but mostly, I would say that she is a bush that loves to grow on the sides of the, stream banks, if you will. And you can use you. I don't really prefer that word. I'm training myself not to work with it anymore. Use.
Mhm.
I feel that is not reciprocal personally. So I'm really
Mhm.
trying to train myself. So we can work with the plant and her gifts for, for our health and well-being, um, all different aspects of the plant we can work with, but I love working with the berries. So they're high in vitamin A and vitamin C.
Mm.
They have antiviral properties, which help with the cold, flu, herpes virus, shingles. It really just boosts our immune system on a really gentle level.
Mm.
And you can take it every day as a supportive. And also if you are if you're feeling out of balance and like a virus is coming, for me, it's my throat. So I would always share with people whatever it is for yourself. I'm getting distracted because the light is going on and off. I apologize about
Yeah.
that. Um,
Yeah, I'm not sure why
so
that's happening.
I'm not sure why I keep trying to move the screen a little, but what I love about her is that she supports our system in such a loving way. So it's gentle and yet powerful.
Mhm.
So elderberry syrup is a perfect example of food as medicine. People make elderberry wine, elderberry pies. They tincture it. You can make a lovely tea blend out of it. And the thing that I have found is that it absolutely reduces the intensity and the duration of a viral load that you have, whatever viral infection you have. So I would always share with people small, frequent dosages are best.
Mm.
Because it literally helps that she has a diuretic in it, the one of the medicinal properties. So when you take it in small, frequent dosages and then make sure that you're hydrating, drinking a lot of water or tea to flush the viral load out, it stops the replication.
Mm.
I also think it just tastes amazing.
It's so true.
Personally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so true. Like, it's easy medicine to love in that regard,
it
especially.
is.
Yeah, that's such a great tip about the frequent dosage. So often, you go to the store. Now, elderberry is huge, and you often see the syrup at the store. It's often very expensive, often has an amazing amount of sugar in it. And, oftentimes it'll say, take 1 teaspoon 3 times a day. And I think, good luck with that.
I say a swig. Really, people I sell the elderberry syrup. So it's an interesting story about my elderberry syrup recipe that I've shared with you. When I first started doing the farmers markets, I made the syrup as everybody does. It had a higher honey content, which acts as a preservative, and I did bottle it so it was shelf stable.
Mhm.
And then I sold it at 3 stores in town and at the farmers market. And what the feedback that I received from my community was it was too sweet.
Hmm.
It was so sweet. And so I played around with the recipe and it was really fun because I felt like a food scientist in some
Mm.
ways. I made so many different batches. I bottled it. Some of them I canned, some of them I didn't. I marked labels, the date that I put them in the refrigerator, and I would every day check them
Mm.
and see, at what point did they start to ferment? Because
Mm.
most of the time it wasn't a mold that grew; it was that they just started to turn a little, almost like to
Mm.
vinegar.
Mhm.
And I finally came up with the recipe that I shared with you, and it is not shelf stable, but if you refrigerate it, it lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks in the refrigerator. And I always tell people if there's any concern, freeze it in ice cube trays and then
Good
just
tip.
pop it out. If you
Mm.
if you are going to go to the expense and buy it, right? If you make your own, I really highly recommend just making in small batches. And as you were saying, it's so easy to do and it's really affordable
Mhm.
to make it on your own. So I always encourage people to make it on their own. But the other thing is, as a community herbalist, I think the biggest lesson that I learned in that moment was to really pause and listen and then adapt.
Hmm.
Because I loved that I was using local honey, but quite honestly, people liked it because it wasn't as sweet and it was less expensive for me to make because I wasn't using as much honey.
Mhm.
And, love the bees
Yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
honoring. Yeah. So
Yeah, well, I love the recipe that you shared with us, and listeners can go to the herbswithrosalie podcast.com to download their illustrated recipe or look for it in the show notes. Do you have any other tips for us with elderberries?
I think the only thing I'd like to add is the importance of adding our intentions to the herbal
Mm,
medicine that we make. So if you're new to making herbal medicine and this recipe, which I hope this or any recipe that you try if you're listening today, but really the importance and the magic of stirring in our love, our intentions for health and well being as you're making the medicine. It's one of the practices that I do every time I make a batch of
mm.
medicine. And specifically elderberry. My husband made me this beautiful, I almost feel like a witch as I'm, he made me a beautiful wood spoon, and I stir and I put in my love and my healing intentions, and I just wanted to name that because I think it's an
Mm.
important part.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, not to be forgotten. Yeah, I love this that your keynote was about the inner landscape, and now we're kind of sharing the inner landscape of medicine making.
Mm,
So, yeah, it's lovely, Helen.
thank you.
I'd love to hear what herbal things are going on in your life right now. Any projects you'd like to share? What's going on?
So, one of the things I'm really excited about is, as you know, I am the director of the Science and Art of Herbalism for Rosemary. And we've talked a lot about my personal passion of community herbalism and elderberry, and my professional and personal, actually both, passion of working with rosemary and the students every day. It's just such a gift and an honor. But we're in our annual sale right now. And one of the things that we have been, through my time working with rosemary, one of the pleasures that I have is hearing from our students that even though we're a remote school, that they students who go through our course and Rosemary's teachings really feel connected to our team, our community, and our course
Mm,
teachers. And we work really hard at that. So the course is 10 lessons. You go through the first lesson, do the assignments that Rosemary is assigned, and send it in to us. And we have a team of teachers that are herbalists from around the world who review and send back with their kind of guidance based on Rosemary's teachings. And this year, we are offering for the first time a monthly live class session with Rosemary.
mm,
So for 1 year, there'll be a cohort of 12 Zoom classes where she will take each, the students of this group on a bit of a deeper dive through the course.
oh, wow.
And I'm really excited about it because I
Yeah.
think that it will just enhance the students' experience on their journey of working with the plants.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that'll be wonderful. Every
yeah,
second I get with rosemary is a gift. So,
yeah,
it's wonderful.
true.
Mm,
So I'm really excited about that. And then on a personal note, I think for my own self, I'm working on meditating every day and
mm,
nurturing my inner landscape and just working with my own light and really just staying grounded in this time, which I think is really important.
mm. Oh, well, we have that in common. I started meditating this year. Um, I started meditating in January, so I'm coming up on a year of meditation, and that's something I've tried to do I won't say my entire life, but it has like come up many times in my life and it's never stuck. And this is the first time that it has. I feel like I can't imagine life without meditating now. It's been such a just a grounding experience and something I look forward to. Before I used to like kind of just like it was uncomfortable to sit,
Hmm.
but now yeah, it's just I found a technique that just really worked for me. And now when I talk to people and they're rightfully and understandably anxious or struggling, and and there's a whole spectrum of what that means for people, but I often feel like meditation is just such a like first step, and it's almost kind of like if somebody said like, oh, I'm really hungry, and you say like, oh, well, are you eating? And they say no, like, that would
Hmm.
be a good first step, is to take some bites of food. Like, that's kinda how I feel about meditation now. I will say that before I started meditating, though, it would be really easy for me to be annoyed at people who talked on and on about meditation, so I try to dial it back a bit, like, I don't wanna be one of those people who are like, you know, forcing it on people or whatever, but it is something I feel really strongly about. I mean, it's transformed my life. So,
So I was just looking because I couldn't remember the name of it, but so I apologize. But I just started listening to Tom. Have you heard of Tom Brown? He was
um,
a naturalist and a teacher here in New England.
do you
Um,
mean Tom Brown Jr. of the Tracker School?
yes,
Yeah, yeah, that was
yeah,
actually kind of my inroad into herbalism, actually.
really.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wasn't very familiar, and I saw that he passed recently.
He did. Yeah.
And I was listening to his book on the way home this weekend.
Mhm.
Uh, and what I found really fascinating, so this is probably new to you, but it was, or not, not new to you, it was new to me, was the story that they share in the book was how he encourages you to go out and sit in the same spot on your land every
Mm.
day,
Mhm.
and just the awareness of what is going on around you. I've been really working on that. Like, there was a story about one of his students who they took a walk together, and they walked out to the stream and they walked back, and when they got back, he said, "Tell me what you experienced." And the student felt really just so excited because he went on for an hour sharing the story of all that he had experienced. And he said, and then I made the mistake. And I said, and what did you see? And he said, it was 24 hours. It was
Oh.
a 20-minute walk, but the in-depth
Hmm.
explanation of the experience that he had. And that's something that I'm really working on from not only sitting in my land,
Mhm.
and I don't mean my land, but outside my door,
Mhm.
um, uh, and really being aware of what's around me as a
Hmm.
part of that meditation, which I
Hmm.
think is just so beautiful, and
Yeah, that is
something that,
beautiful.
quite frankly, with my ADHD, I feel like, it's a challenge, but the more I practice, the more I crave it. I think
Mhm.
I would is that what you have experienced?
Absolutely. Yeah, the sit spot is what it's often called in those traditions, a sit spot, and, that was one of my foundational things that I brought me into herbalism and something I still practice today. It's kind of, I consider it different than, like, my early morning meditation time, but yeah, so similar. Um, and, yeah, something I definitely highly recommend because I feel like that, I was so my good friend Mason, I was just listening to a podcast with him. I know you were on Mason's podcast over at Herbal. Shout out to Mason. Um, I was listening to a podcast with him where he was actually being interviewed, and he said, if you go out to an old growth forest, you can't help but have a spiritual experience.
Mhm.
And spiritual meaning non-religious, but this kind of deep connection. And I love the way he said that because I was like, yes. And that was so much of, over 20 years ago when I started to be an herbalist, it was that like going out every day, going out in all the different weather and going out and, forming these relationships with plants that was so transformative and, a spiritual experience. And that, so it reminds me of the sit spot. It's like you just can't help but have these amazing connections. It's like in some ways the sit spot is like the door is open and then you just walk through it and you can't help but see what's on the other side, So sometimes I feel like when we talk about connection to the plants, like for somebody who's just starting out, it might feel like, oh, that's like something special that, just really connected people have, or, maybe airy fairy people have, or, just something like it can seem unattainable or out of reach or something. And I just love the way that Mason said it. It's like, you just can't help but have
Oh,
that connection, when you're out there. And what I love about the sit spot too, like you said, Helen, it's outside your door. So you don't have to go to a national park. You don't have to sit, on the edge of the Grand Canyon. It does not have to be this grandiose, it can be you in a folding chair in your backyard, right? You sitting on your front porch. It could even be sitting at a bus stop. I mean, there's no rules about this. And because it's, the beauty out there is everywhere.
I love
So,
that. It's
yeah.
so true. So
Yeah.
I have a fun, quick story, if that's okay,
Please,
about
please.
elder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I moved about 8 years ago from the farm where I was living in all the elder to a home. I got remarried, and I'm about a mile from from my house. And I was talking to Karen Sanders, who is a dear friend and teacher of mine. And I was sharing with her that I was having a really hard time grounding into this new place where I was in the land. And she offered me a few really wonderful tips on meditating and connecting. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I'm thinking, I feel like I'm doing the work, but I'm not really feeling like I'm any more connected to this land than, I was really mourning the moving. Not that I wasn't happy where I was, but it was a transition, right?
Yeah.
So one day we had been up filming Rosemary, and Emma, our marketing director, who's also a dear friend of mine, was here. And we had just driven in after a long day to my driveway. And I kept getting this pull to this part of the property and the land that was kind of off a bit. And I said to her, we got to go. Let's go. Like, we got out of the car and we kind of bounded through the meadow over to this spot that was really just screaming, come over here, And all of a sudden I looked down and I said, that's Elder. And Emma looks at me and she says, it's Elder. And we both so it was this beautiful thing. And I think that's one of the things that is such a gift from the plants. Is that they show up for us, and for me, a bird could have dropped a seed there because I make elderberry syrup, from the compost. Who knows how it happened? It was the biggest gift for me. And it is a huge plot of elderberry now. And they're not mowed. They're 3 or 4 years old now, established. And that is my sit spot this winter.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm going to pound my little path out there. And I was thinking about a little bench or, it doesn't even matter. I'll sit in the snow. But I really have been meditating inside. But I've been inspired by listening to this audiobook from Tom Brown. So anyway, I'll let you know how that all.
Sorry. Yeah, I want to hear.
Unfolds.
Yeah, it's interesting. The elder shrub, as you're talking, it's like I'm being reminded that elder is one of my favorite plants to greet. There's something, I feel this with many plants, but there's something about elder when I come upon my favorite elder shrubs that are around my house or come upon elder unexpectedly. I think my heart fills with so much gratitude every single time. I just think, wow, like this is medicine that I rely on so much, both the flowers and the berries. And I'm excited to start working with the leaves. That's come up on the podcast a couple times recently. So I'm excited to start that, but especially the flowers and the berries. They were some of the first medicine I worked with. There's something I consistently make medicine with, all throughout the year. And yeah, there's just this incredible swelling of gratitude. And I won't say that doesn't happen with other plants, but it's very remarkable with elder. There's something about, and then there's just this still, I hope I never lose this, Helen, but this, I didn't grow up using herbal medicine as a kid. It was something that came in my early 20s. But to walk upon an elder and just like the recognition, like that is my medicine. I mean, it's just like so cool to me. Like it just still fills me with so much joy. Like, oh, these flowers and berries are, medicine and food, as you pointed out, as well. So I don't know. There's just something about it. I hope I never lose that excitement over just finding this, outside my door. It didn't come from a pharmacy. It didn't come even from the grocery store, but it came out there, from the land. So, yeah.
I love that about herbalism. I feel like just what you're describing, it's like there's friends everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
I really feel that way. Dandelion is another one for me like that, right? I see her and I light up. It's like my whole being has such gratitude for her and she's so joyful. But to your elder story, one of the things that I've been really sitting with recently is I was somewhat shocked at how much elder helped me work through my grief and what heart medicine she is. And I think that we oftentimes, at least for me, what it has done is really opened my mind to not putting these plants that we cherish and love and respect so deeply in a box of what they should be
Mhm.
doing for our body, if that makes sense, or
Mhm.
how we as humans can oftentimes have this way of saying this plant is for this.
Mhm.
And really being open in this moment, in this time, as we're all changing and shifting, and knowing that the plants, I think, are actually shifting and changing before us.
Mhm.
And we know, I mean, Rosemary has shared this, and I know many, many herbalists share it, that the plants are our teachers.
Mhm.
And I think in this moment, it's really important. I think that's a big part of my um, wanting to meditate out in nature and not in my home, is really to be open and
Mhm.
present to the shifting times, if you will, and the messages
Mhm.
and what the plants do have to teach us, because I think that in this moment they're going to have a lot to say for us. And I think
Mhm.
that as herbalists, it's really important for us not to be in our little boxes. At least I'm speaking to myself,
Mhm.
but to really be open to a plant being able to help on different levels than
Mhm.
what we may have historically seen, because I think they're showing up in a way that we need right now for us,
Mhm.
and they're adapting just like we are.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of perspective. It makes me think, more and more I just reflect upon, like, when I first started learning about herbs, I did learn kind of strictly through herbal actions and like what is the plant good for. Although my initial teacher, she was really fabulous and did, teach about relationship and connection as well. But that was just kind of my mentality, is like memorizing lists of things, um and more I just have, I would say, more clarity that the real magic and beauty with herbalism is that connection and relationship between us and the plants. And when to hear you
Mhm.
talk about elder helping you through grief, I feel like, not to like put anything on you, Helen, but I just feel like that comes from that relationship.
Mm.
It's like, not because there's a list of herbal actions of like what elder does, but, and when I think about relationship, the beautiful thing about that is it's like a give and take, and it's an interaction.
Yes.
And so sometimes we can think of like we take herbs and they do things to us, like taking an aspirin or something, like taking a Tums. We take it, they do something to us. But that, even with, honestly, with pharmaceuticals, that's not really the thing. It's like we, welcome herbs into our body, into our being, into our presence. And then there's an interaction there of a back and forth, and it's a response and a dance together. And that, I think, is one of the beautiful things of why we react to herbs in different ways, is because, like, I
Mhm.
am not you and you are not me. And so when we interact with an herb, we have different experiences, just as we would with like a person. You might, love somebody and I might not love that person, but it's just
Right.
it's like they were just different. We're all different. We can't expect the same things, the same outcome. So yeah, it's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And also just that I have no doubt that elders showing up for you in that way because of the investment you've made in that relationship with elder.
Mm.
Like it wasn't
Thank you. It's interesting, I took a pause making my herbal medicine for a couple of years. I'm actually not selling in town or offering it to my community in this moment. And a big part of that was I felt like it became a chore.
hmm.
I'd lost my, here I am sharing with anyone to put their love and intention and gratitude in the medicine they're making. And I lost my way with that
Hmm.
for a hot minute.
Mhm.
And it really struck me. And I decided to take a pause on the offering because it wasn't the right relationship that I wanted for myself with that plant. And it brought me back to this. I think sometimes pauses are so beautiful for that.
Mhm.
The remembering and reminding myself of
Mhm.
what's important and being
Yeah.
open. And I'm really grateful for that. And I think that, yeah, it's, she is a gift to me for sure.
Hmm. Well, Helen, before you go, I have one last question for you. And that question is, and I feel like we've already touched on this a lot, but I'm going to
Yeah.
ask it anyway. How do herbs instill hope in you?
Mm. I think through generosity is one way.
Mhm.
The plants are so generous, and I just think that give no matter what, really. I mean, they show up for us as humans and in nature for the animals and, their own communities, and they are so generous.
Mm.
Um, and they don't really expect anything in return. At least that's been my experience, is that they are there and they just give. And I think that that is such a beautiful thing in this moment. I also think from a hope standpoint and um, back to the joy and the joy that they share with us when we meet them and greet them. Whether you're an herbalist or not, flowers bring sunshine to people,
Mhm.
right? They really do. Walking in the forest, as you were sharing what Mason said, how can you not have a spiritual experience of some kind? I mean, nature in itself is so grounding and healing and generous in the beauty of what it shares that I think that gives me hope. Um, and may we all continue to be generous, and may we all continue to walk in right relationship on our sweet Mother Earth and not take it for granted.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's the thing that I really appreciated about Tom Brown's book is while I didn't know him and I wished I had been able to go to one of his, I don't know how he wasn't on my radar, but one of the things he was saying is, if we each just have one small impact for our Mother Earth and the way that we walk in the world, that small impact will resound in larger impact and really have a ripple effect. And I think we need that now.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of hope.
Mm. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Helen. It's been so great to connect with you. Thank you for sharing this so much wisdom and beauty with us and relationship with Elder as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosalee. And I would just like to take a minute and thank you for having me.
Oh,
I just adore you. I have like a little girl crush on
like,
you.
likewise, Helen. Likewise.
And I've been tickled. I've been really looking forward to this, but I also from a deep respect place as well
Mhm.
in your teachings and the work that you do in the world and how you share it. Um, I just, I have a lot of gratitude. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Helen.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card and to get a transcript of the show should you want it. There, you'll also be able to sign up for my weekly newsletter, which is the best way to stay in touch with me. You can find more about Rosemary's offerings at scienceandartofherbalism.com. That's scienceandartofherbalism.com. And remember, they're having their annual sale right now. If you'd like more herbal episodes to head your way, then one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Emily Thomas Anderson is the project manager who oversees the entire podcast operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes and on and on. I often tell people, I just show up. Emily does most of the heavy lifting. Nicole Paul is the operator for the entire Herbs with Rosalee school and community. She keeps an eagle eye view on everything to ensure it's running smoothly. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them, and I know you love them. Once the illustration is ready, Jenny creates the recipe cards as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our behind-the-scenes tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. If you've written in with a question, undoubtedly you got help from them. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Thank you so much for your support through your comments, reviews, and ratings. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on elderberry and relationship and connection to plants. All right, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you know it. You get your very own gold star and this herbal tidbit. I love that Helen mentioned many times that elder can also be food, because that's how I was first introduced to elder. We would make elderberry syrup and then pour that over pancakes and desserts. And for many years, I made elderberry wine. And you can also cook those delightful flowers into breads and cakes and muffins, or enjoy the cordial. Both the flowers and berries are wonderful for modulating inflammation, and they're a great addition to our daily foods.